It's time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest, undertaking an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about the movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Matt Freeman. Matt, how are you this fine evening?
I'm doing fantastic, Scott. It's raining here. It's a nice, pleasant rain. May have actually stopped in the last 30 seconds.
It's raining here too.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
It's like we're in the same room.
It's like we're in the same room. We are in the same room, metaphysically. And I'm pleased that we're going to be talking about a director of some interest named Neill Blomkamp, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Yeah, I guess we should have looked this up before we started recording, if it's Blomkamp or Blomkamp. I say Blomkamp, so I'm probably going to say that again over the course of this podcast.
For some reason, I say Blomkamp, even though it would be Blomkamp in English pronunciation, but he's not American. He's South African, isn't he?
Yeah, South African.
Because all of his movies are fundamentally about the issues of South Africa to a greater or lesser degree of success. But before we go into that, let's talk about some news, Scott.
Is it time for the news?
I think so.
We didn't do the news last week, so there's some news items that we might have missed that we're going to have to talk about. The first one being, Matt, did you know that Tom Hiddleston is in talks to play the next James Bond?
I did actually, but that's because we talked about it about 5 minutes ago.
Well, you're spoiling the inside track.
I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't know about this.
Yes,
this is interesting.
So this is just a rumor. We don't know for sure. It's just sources have said that he's in talks, nearing final talks. We also know that Sam Mendes is walking away from Bond. He's not going to direct the next one, so we're going to probably get like a full reboot. What do you think about Hiddleston's potential casting? Do you think he'd make a good Bond?
Yeah, in his appearance, he reminds me a lot more of, a throwback to at least one Bond, back to Pierce Brosnan or something, where you have kind of a more dapper, physically lithe, not giant, jacked Bond. And, I imagine they're going to be going for a whole different aesthetic with him. But, time will tell, I guess, what exactly they choose to do. I think he could be fine. He's definitely sufficiently British for my tastes. So
yeah, I guess I was kind of hoping that they would like advance forward a little bit and do something different with it. I think, like you said, I think Pierce Brosnan is a really apt comparison because I think he'll be a very similar type of Bond. I was hoping to see something kind of new and different, but maybe after 3 or four Daniel Craig movies, they wanted to go back to something a little more traditional. I heard there's talks about a female director, which would be a huge step for Bond. But I like Tom Hiddleston. He's a good actor. He's got the charm thing down, and I think he would do a good job here. So we'll see. We'll see when the news becomes official. We will be sure to let everyone know.
Yeah, and everyone go check out our Bond podcast to get a sense of how much we all just love the Bond franchise.
We just love it. It's our favorite. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's problematic. I don't like the word problematic, but it's an apt word.
Yeah, it's a problematic word, but but I'll approve its use here.
Yeah. So the other news item we had actually dropped today. Rogue One is going in for reshoots. Now, this news on its own, Matt, is not a big deal because most movies, especially Disney movies, have reshoots. Marvel, every single one of the Marvel movie does some sort of reshoots. But the news that came along with this one is these aren't planned reshoots. These were reshoots done because Disney was not happy with the first cut of the movie, and it is not testing well. And a lot of people, anonymous sources close to the movie, are saying that it is just not working. So they're doing 4 weeks of reshoots, which is pretty substantial. This has me pretty nervous because I want to like this movie.
Yeah, I definitely groaned when I saw this headline, and it sort of all by itself dashes my hopes, because you just know you can't go back into a movie after it's been made and do reshoots and like change the substance of the movie or change the character arcs or change the plot or what have you. At best, you're going to be tweaking things, and I don't know. My intuition is that you cannot fix a movie that's broken in this way, and you're actually likely to make it worse by sort of throwing in dissonant elements. So I'm greatly saddened by this, because I was looking forward to this new Star Wars universe, I suppose, that we're starting up now. And
Yeah,
it's already off on almost the wrong foot.
yeah. I mean, it had the potential to be the first Star Wars movie without a freaking Skywalker in it, and without Jedi in it at all. And like, I think it was described as like Saving Private Ryan, but in the Star Wars universe. And man, I really want this movie to be good. I hope it's good. I hope whatever problems the movie is having, that these reshoots can fix it. But I'm kind of with you on this, that it's just not a good sign, and even 4 weeks of reshoots might not be enough to save the core of the movie just not working. This is one of those things that I wish, like, we'll never really know exactly what it was that was fixed. But I wish I wish we could know, because
Yeah.
I wonder what it was about this movie that's just not working.
Yeah, no, I wish I could know too, just for the sake of understanding more about the process of how films are made. But yeah, I think you're right. We'll probably never know.
Yeah. All right, one last news item, and this one is yours, Matt. So take it away.
Yeah. So at a recent convention, George R. Martin, author of the Game of Thrones story, read aloud a chapter released from the new book that he's going to be, letting out in sometime in the next few months, hopefully.
Oh yeah, right.
Knock on wood. And it was a really good chapter. He's released 2 or 3 chapters from this book previously over the last 6 years he's been working on it. That's not an exaggeration. That's the actual number. And this one, it's interesting because he didn't actually release it. He just read it out loud. But of course, people in the audience were recording it, because this is 2016, and they've transcribed it, and you can read it online if you find the link. Actually, I'll find the link and put it in the show notes. And it was a really good chapter. It made me really happy and hopeful about this next book. I mean, I've loved this series forever, but it's always really nice when you're just sort of gratified to see that it's good to be patient.
Yeah.
And it was. I guess I'll avoid giving any spoilers about who the character in the chapter is or anything like that. But if you're curious, it's probably worth checking out.
It's someone that's not featured in the show, right? The character.
Correct. Yeah, it's only in the Vegas sense, could you argue? Yeah, they're not in the show. It's interesting because George R. R. Martin has almost sort of systematically seems to be doing things in reaction to the show. Like, he recently released, fairly recently, I'm not sure when this was, released a new chapter from one of the characters in the Dorne subplot of the books, and this character is also not in the show. So, and this was almost very, it was very coincidentally at around the same time people were moaning and groaning about how bad the Dorne plotline in the show is. So it's almost like a reaction to that. Like, he's saying, like, no, don't be mad, because the Dorne plotline is going to be good in the books. And then, again, trying not to spoil it, but this one is more of a reaction to, or if it's a reaction to people worrying about the Ironborn plotline. So,
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I've actually not read any of the preview chapters for this book. I used to do that. I read the preview chapters for the last book, but I think I decided mentally that I don't ever think this book's going to come out, so if I read a chapter, it's just going to make me excited for it. And if the book does come out, then I will be pleasantly surprised. and I will read those chapters when I get it. So
Yeah, I wonder if people know that George R. R. Martin has stated that if he dies before finishing the book, that no shred of the book will be released. That it'll be like locked in his computer, go to his grave with him.
in his old ass computer because he writes
Yeah.
in DOS.
Right. I'm hoping some benevolent cat burglar like steals his computer.
I wonder how long that can stay true for. Okay, I know there's wills and stuff, but eventually this stuff will move to his estate, and they have the right to make whatever decisions they want, right?
Yeah, I like how we're talking about this like it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, he's gonna. It's really
Yeah.
I remember George flipped out when someone asked him a question like, "What happens if you die?" Because that's kind of really rude to to the human being, and I recognize that people are so concerned about the book and they don't care about the human being that will have to have died to make all these conversations happen. But no, I mean, I do think this book is probably coming out within a year, but if he'll ever get around to finishing the last one, I don't know. I feel like he has an out now with the show passing it. Like he has no pressure, and I don't know if he really wants to write this story anymore. I think he's kind of bored of it. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just if you look at the pace at which he wrote the first three books, it was this incredible pace. It was like an inhumanly fast pace. And then I think either success got to him or he just got less interested, like you say. And now this is the current book is like the slowest thing in the world by contrast. So yeah, I think that's true. Although, like I said, this new chapter is fantastic. So even if he has lost interest, he hasn't stopped trying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. He's just trying at a much slower pace. I guess.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, we will again update if he posts another. Like I remember, I think it was Dance of Dragons. He posted a thing on his blog that said like the ape is dead or something because he called book 5 a monkey on his back, which is funny to think about now because he was complaining about how that was something looming over his head for so long, and that took less time than this one has taken now.
Right.
So I hope if it's going to come out in the fall, it takes a few months to like finish editing and publication and all that stuff. So I figured the announcement would be within the next couple months, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we can hope.
It would be a great thing to announce like the day of the season finale, just to build buzz. If I was in marketing, that's what I would do.
Totally. I will. Yeah, we'll call that a prediction. That's our Daily Planet prediction.
Oh, look at us! I hope we're right.
Day of the season finale. Week of the season finale.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Week of the season finale. All right, it's recorded now.
Yep.
We're bound to it. We can't walk back on it. But no, I think that would be a smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move on to our main event. We're doing our Deconstructing of the Director series that we've done 3 or 4 times before. We did Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, and then we kind of did the Coen brothers. We only talked about their comedy movies. We didn't talk about their whole set of movies, but it counts, right? I think it counts.
Yeah, sure.
So today we're talking about Neill Blomkamp. I'm just going to say Blomkamp, and I'll be wrong, and that'll be fine.
That's fine.
The impetus for us talking about this was I think you finally got to see Elysium, and I think he's a really fascinating director. I think when we do these deconstructing things, we usually try to pick directors with more films in their filmography because it allows us to get a better idea of who they are as a director. But I think this guy is a fascinating person that kind of burst on the scene in 2009, made a movie in District 9 that was universally loved. He was declared like the next big, great sci-fi director. Peter Jackson loved him, and that was still when Peter Jackson was off a high from all the Lord of the Rings stuff, and he was considered one of the best directors in the genre as well. And then, with his next 2 movies, they just kind of got worse and worse. I mean, we'll talk in detail, but Elysium is a movie with a great concept, but a lot of problems. Chappie, I've made very clear my opinion on that movie, and I'll reiterate it again today because somehow you got me to rewatch this movie that I swore I would never rewatch.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I hope in this conversation we can try to figure out why this happened, and yeah, what exactly is going on here? Because, is he a talented person who's doing weird, inexplicable things, or was District 9 a fluke? Anyway, yeah, we'll try to figure this out.
Yeah, yeah. So let's jump into District 9 then. I had not seen this movie in a long time. I don't know if I've seen it since the first time I had saw it, and I watched it again the other day. And we were talking about how he's kind of started making worse and worse movies. So in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder if this is actually not as good of a movie as everyone thought it was. And we were just kind of fascinated by the original idea, but when you look in the details of the movie, it has the same problems that all the other ones have. I was wondering if that was possible. And that's not the case at all. This is a really, really great movie. It's such a wonderful, simple concept. It's a metaphor that's very apt and works for both racial tension, not just in South Africa, but around the world. But also is very, very particularly focused on South Africa, where Blomkamp grew up. The apartheid and segregation that he was witness to. It's just a really good movie. Like, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I love this movie. It has some really weird kind of kooky sci-fi elements, but they really work really well, and they're either fun or creepy or kind of whatever they're supposed to be. Like you can rattle off the kind of the voodoo, or what, I'm not exactly sure what you would call it, but you know the mercenaries who think that they're going to get more power by eating the pieces of the aliens, and like one of them's a warlord and then want to eat the protagonist alien, and that could be extremely cheesy and dumb, and it sort of is cheesy, but it's cheesy in a way that that the movie is aware of, and it works within the movie. Um, it's just one example. There's also like the powered suit, the power armor that is involved at one point in the movie. It's like
Yeah.
this element actually reminds me of some of the stupid crap in later movies, but it works really well in this movie. It fits really well. It's used in a way that that like it's used in a way that's exciting, and then it breaks at kind of just the right time, where the tension needs it to break, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm picking out these elements because I'm sort of biased in favor of looking for things in this movie that are reminiscent of the later movies. But the thing is, even the things that are reminiscent of the later movies actually work really well in this movie. And I think it's just a combination of like really good special effects that are well integrated into the story, and a really good CGI character, which is the alien. I forget his name.
What is his name? Is it like Michael or something? It's some
Yeah,
or
I
like
think it's
or Chris. It's something really.
Christopher.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Christopher.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Anyway, that was, I rambled a bit, but I really did like this movie. Yeah,
yeah, no, and I think the thing I love the most about it, and I think a reason why all the elements that we see here that are used in other movies work here better, is because this faux documentary style that he used to shoot this movie really works here, and it lends to like the authenticity of it in a way that makes the metaphor really stick more. The film seems very realistic and gritty, and we're dealing with aliens that look like bugs basically, but because it's treated as a documentary, it kind of brings you into it, and um, it makes it feel more real and more impacting. Um, I also liked how it's kind of this mix of sci-fi and body horror, and I really like body horror movies. Like The Fly is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I liked the slow transformation of the main character into one of the aliens. I thought that was done really in a really interesting way. Um,
yeah, yeah. Speaking of that character, I love that they give you this long sequence toward the beginning that shows that he's just an idiot and not a particularly good person. I think that was really refreshing and interesting, because like he's the guy who's in charge of this documentary, and you see all these indications that he's um, completely oblivious to like the unethical nature of his position, and he, or at least if he is slightly aware of it, he's willfully turning a blind eye to it to advance himself. And he's like in this politically advantageous marriage or relationship at least, and he's just not a very likable person at the beginning. And what and so the course of the story is actually what turns you in his favor. It's not like most movies actually where they spend the first bit of the movie making you like the protagonist so that you're on their side as the movie progresses. If anything, the movie spends time making you like and sympathize for the alien Christopher, and Vicus is just this hapless idiot who becomes involved in it, and then he kind of wins you over by doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting and novel story, like narrative mechanic that you don't see very often.
Yeah, like the less human he becomes, the more humane he becomes. I think that's a really good touch. I agree. And I really like that. And I think we'll see that again in Elysium to a not as well done effect, but he does like these characters at the beginning who don't really seem like good people redeeming themselves in some way. He likes that theme. I think it is cool. Like, I think one of the reasons why people were so excited about him in this movie is, I mean, South Africa is not a culture or a history that we see depicted in movies a lot. We all know about apartheid, but we don't really think about it very much. And you can tell with not only this movie, but all of his work, that this is something that deeply impacts him and probably the entire culture of the country. And it was really cool to see this done in a way that uses sci-fi in the way that I think sci-fi is best used as a metaphor for something that we experience in everyday life.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this movie is definitely the most on the nose in terms of the metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, I think wasn't the district that black people were sent to during apartheid, I think was like District 8 or something. So it's literally like right on the nose. Like there's no confusion to be had here. There's nothing really subtextual here. But it doesn't matter because it works so well, and it manages to take that metaphor and then mix in this story about bugs, kind of, but sympathetic bugs. And I mean, you feel bad for both Christopher and you feel bad for Vicus as well, and I like the kind of open ending too. I like that he says he's going to come back in 3 years. Will he ever come back? Or, I mean, does he actually have a cure for a person fully transforming into an alien? Like, those questions are left open, and they really don't matter so much. I also like that he still very much loves his wife. There is some indication, like you said, that this is just a very political marriage, and it was used for political gain. But, I mean, he's making the little metal roses and sending them at his wife's doorstep at the end of the movie. It was a nice little touch that I enjoyed.
Yeah, right. It's like, it's interesting because it's a happy ending, even though he's, still stuck as an alien because he's redeemed himself, and that's what you care about at that point. So,
right.
It really touches you kind of in just the right way. I wanted to loop back just a second to you mentioned the faux documentary style and how funny it is that the movie, like you said, it starts out in this faux documentary style, like The Office or something. And then at some random point that isn't even demarcated for you, it just doesn't even bother with that anymore. and it turns into an action movie by the end, basically. The way it's shot just completely changes. And it doesn't matter. Like normally that would be a thing that would be totally distracting, and that would be like all people could talk about leaving a movie would be like, why did they have that weird choice with the documentary? But it just doesn't matter in this movie because you're just not. It's just a device that serves its purpose, and then it moves out of the way, and it's not distracting. It's almost weird to discuss it because it's not distracting. It's just an interesting choice.
Yeah, it's like a perfect way to kind of do exposition and get you introduced to this world, which is a world very much like our own, except for there's this giant spaceship floating above Johannesburg. But yeah, the faux documentary is something he kind of continues to do in his other movies to, I think, lesser and lesser effect. Chappie in particular, and we'll get to this, but starts off with like documentary talking head interviews and concludes with it, but it has no bearing on anything. It was just kind of thrown in there because maybe he felt like either, hey, people liked this, or this has become my trademark, so I have to do it. But yeah, here it just, in this movie, it just works and it makes sense, and it brings you into the story in a way that I think not doing it this way would not have been as effective for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's a really well written story, and he did write this as well as direct. I think he's written and directed all three of these movies that we're going to talk about today. But man, I
was going to ask who wrote it. I mean, it's really interesting because he's super talented. He's undeniably super talented. If he wrote and directed this, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think everyone was so excited. And I could see watching this movie again, even knowing where I know his career is going to go. I can see why people were excited because he has a very unique vision, a unique voice. I think, did he introduce us to the main actor? I can't even pronounce his name. Sharlto Copley?
Yeah, I think so.
Was this the first big role he had been in?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that because I remember watching some video where he was basically like introducing this guy as like this great actor who was like, I'm sure this guy's going to be great. This guy's going to be the next big thing or whatever. And the guy's been in a number of things actually.
Yeah. I mean, he's in his next film as well. He's also possibly one of the worst parts of that film, but we'll get to that. But no, he's really good here. I mean, like, he has to play this character who, you're right, starts off as a buffoon, and he plays this bumbling idiot character so well. But then he's also able to channel this deep sense of like mourning and pathos after his life starts to go awry. That even though he is kind of a jerk at the beginning, you turn and feel for him, and he plays both sides of that really well.
Yeah. I mean, the parts when he's changing and when they have him like, basically they're forcing him to kill the aliens, and he's like freaking out. That's kind of an amazing section of the movie, and it's he really conveys that like outrage and confusion and so forth perfectly.
I did enjoy the alien weapon effects in this movie, like the people, like you shoot the ray gun and they just explode. I don't know why, but that made me almost laugh every time it happened. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But that was a really effective effect.
Yeah, that's another example of like the weird stuff that comes off as extremely childish in the other movies. Like, he sort of does the same things where he's like throws in all this snazzy future tech in the other movies, and it just comes off as like a 13-year-old designed it. But in this movie, it's perfect.
Yeah,
like it just fits, and I think you're supposed to laugh at those scenes. I don't know.
I think
maybe
so
not.
too.
Maybe we're just weird, but I mean, I definitely laugh at those scenes too.
I think you are. I think so.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention? Actually, I did have one more thing. Did you know that the Nigerian government was not happy about this movie? The way, because all the gangsters in District 9 are Nigerian, and it paints them as these cannibalistic voodoo people. They did not like that depiction at all.
Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, that is unfortunate because the movie is trying to actually be an anti-racist movie, but I guess he miscalculated on that one.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some history between those two countries. I mean, I don't know why they picked Nigerian people for that. I mean, would it not have been just as effective for them to be just South African gangsters? I don't know.
I didn't even know that was. I don't remember that detail. That's kind of bizarre. It's like, we maybe he was so concerned about not portraying South African blacks negatively that he went out of his way for the negatively portrayed blacks in the movie to be not South African. And
yeah, that could be. I wonder if there. I should look that up. I wonder if there's something more about that. But yeah, that's I really like this movie, and yeah, I'm even kind of more sad now going into these next two, because it's all downhill from here,
Yeah,
man.
well, let's just try to get through it quickly, Scott.
Yeah. So 4 years went by, and before Blomkamp came back with his next film, um, I remember seeing the first trailers for Elysium, which came out in 2013, and I was really excited for this movie. I mean, Matt Damon was in it. He's great. The whole concept seems really cool. The concept of all the wealthy people live on this ring orbiting the planet, and the planet is just a dumping ground for all the poor people. It's a really interesting concept, and there's, again, a lot of very clear, obvious metaphors that can go into this thing on classism in our country, and rich versus poor, and there's all this stuff that goes into it. But then you watch the actual movie, and it just all
Yeah.
falls apart. It just really just falls apart. The first maybe 30 minutes of this movie are actually really good, and then everything from there stumbles and falls, and it. Man, this movie.
Yeah.
What was your thought on it? Because you just saw it for the first time really recently, right?
Yeah, I'd say that the main flaws would be pacing and characterization. Um, I think pacing would be what I would name first because, like you said, it has a good start, but at a certain point, it just starts indulging too much time into certain scenes that don't really deserve it, and so the wind is now out of your sails, and you don't care about what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and then it just kind of stays there. I'm gonna be honest. I just stopped watching this movie at some point and didn't finish it because of exactly that. Like, and that takes a lot for me, honestly. Like, I'm I'm someone who, if it takes me 3 days of watching a movie in pieces to finish the movie, I'll do that. But this movie, I was just like, at a certain point, it was just like, oh, something, something, something interrupted me. Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Turn it off and never want to watch it again. Which is just like, yeah, you've totally lost me in terms of just how slow things are going, and also you never hooked me in the first place in terms of character. You're right that the first bit was engaging in the sense that it's like propulsive and it keeps you going, but you have failed to engage me in terms of character, and so I don't care.
Yeah.
Um,
Matt Damon is
and,
a wet blanket in this movie, and I think it
yeah,
takes a lot of skill to do that with an actor so charismatic and likable as Matt Damon. But he's just nothing. Like, he doesn't really have a personality, and maybe he's supposed to represent all poor people, and that's why, like, he's just so bland and uninteresting. But it just doesn't work. I don't ever really care about him. And you didn't get to see the end of the movie. The end of the movie is when he sacrifices himself to basically make every single person on Earth a citizen of Elysium, because the data that's in his head that will reset the system has like a firewall on it that anyone that accesses it besides the main person will be immediately killed. Some nebulous sci-fi rule.
yeah,
But he sacrifices himself at the end, and it's supposed to be this deep, impactful moment because this guy who, at the beginning, really only cared about himself, finally is sacrificing himself for other people. Very similar to District 9. But you just don't really care. And the other big mistake here is, if this is really supposed to be a classism movie about the poor versus the rich, the haves versus the have-nots, it devolves into this weird competition between Matt Damon's character and the Chateau Copley character, who is just playing another poor person on Earth that just works for the rich government, and he's just a crazy person. Like, he has no characterization either. So the main conflict is not really between Elysium and Earth; it's between these two guys, because the only person really preventing Matt Damon from getting what he wants is this other guy, and that just
yeah,
completely destroys the metaphor, and it just doesn't work.
yeah, yeah. It should be noted that while Sharito Copley's character is like a bad guy and like a mercenary who's willing to kill people, the movie basically, toward the beginning, one of the first things that happens is Matt Damon's character and a posse of criminals straight up murders a dude, um, to get information out of his head.
Yeah.
Like it's not, it's not, there's not even like, Matt Damon's not even like all right, we got to really go out of our way to make sure he's not harmed. Um,
No, all he
he
cares
doesn't
about
even,
that his head isn't damaged because that's where they
yeah,
need the information from.
exactly. And so basically he comes off as worse than Vicus does in the first movie, and you don't like Vicus, but you don't think Vicus is just a scumbag. You're just like, well, this guy's just a typical person of his society at worst. Um, I think, if I had to diagnose this or compare it directly to District 9, I'd say the flaw would be that even though you didn't like and didn't really care about Vicus for the first bit of that movie, you very quickly did like and care about the alien Christopher. And by the time the movie kind of got going, eventually you did get to care about Vicus, but you always cared about Christopher. So you were always engaged in terms of the characters. In this movie, there is no sympathetic character. I think they maybe tried to make his love interest the sympathetic character,
Yeah,
but I
they
was like, my
failed.
mind was just completely wandering during those scenes, and because I was like, yep, this is the scene where it's a love interest, and yep, I see where this is going. I don't care because it's not.
Well, they didn't make her a focal point of the movie like they made Christopher in the first one.
Yeah,
Her entire existence revolves around Matt Damon's character, Max. And
yeah,
she's only really seen in scenes where he's in or he needs something from her. So we don't really think of her as her own character. She's just a thing that motivates him to stop thinking about himself. And that's really it. Yeah, so you're right. They don't have that character at all. Um,
yeah,
the other problem is Jodie Foster as the villain. The
uh-huh.
rich villain is terrible. I like Jodie Foster. I don't know what she's doing in this movie. The accent she's doing, like what the directorial notes for her in this movie, I don't know. But it's terrible, and her
Yeah,
motivation is really nebulous and weird. Like I guess it's just supposed to be, oh, she's rich, so she's mean. Um, I don't know. But then like it, the actual president of Elysium that she's trying to overthrow in some stupid coup side plot that doesn't matter. Um, it seems like not too terrible of a person. So it's like he wasn't fully ready to commit to this metaphor. Like if you're trying to show this metaphor about how bad classism is, but you kind of make all the poor people just as bad as the rich people, then your metaphor falls on its face. It doesn't
yeah,
work.
right. Yeah, I mean, you can really get a lot of like I will forgive an endless amount of really obvious sci-fi metaphors as long as I actually care about the story. But I'm not motivated in this story, and so all I'm left with is nitpicking, like we're doing right now. And
Right.
and yeah, I mean, there's a lot. He's trying to do too much perhaps with the metaphors in this one. Like, and perhaps it's becoming redundant for me to keep comparing it to District 9. But like District 9, there's sort of like one key metaphor, and maybe there were sort of ancillary, you know, like sub metaphors coming off of that, but there was really the one metaphor of apartheid equals these aliens, you know,
Mm-hmm.
all that. This movie is doing a lot of different things involving classism vaguely, but there's so many branches and so many different things going on, like you just said, with like even on Elysium, there's different factions. There's basically the faction who's in charge who wants to have like a more liberal minded attitude toward the poor people, and then her faction, which I don't know for some reason brings to mind like neoconservatives.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I think that's
and
intended. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I'm sure it's all intended because I'm sure he thinks this stuff through. I mean, I think he's the kind of person who, when he's sitting down to write a script, he like thinks about social issues first, constructs metaphors that are interesting to him, and then layers on the characters. Sort of a very constructive approach to creating stories. Um, I just think this one needed to stay in the oven a little bit longer until he had actually figured out the characters, rather
Yeah.
than just kind of half baking the metaphor and then cramming in some characters and getting Matt Damon signed and going for it.
Yeah, he actually has a really good quote about this that I want to read you because it kind of makes me like him more. Or at least I thought so until I watched Chappie again, and now I'm mad at him again. But his quote on this movie was, "I feel like I fucked it up. I feel like ultimately the story is not the right story. I still think the satirical idea of a ring filled with rich people hovering above the impoverished earth is an awesome idea. I love it so much. I almost want to go back and do it correctly. But I just think the script wasn't. I just didn't make a good enough film, is ultimately what it is. I feel like I executed all the stuff that I could be executed, like costume and set design. But ultimately, it was all resting on somewhat not totally formed skeletal system, so the script just wasn't there. And I think that's
Wow.
absolutely true. Um,
Yeah.
that the base of the story was a good idea that wasn't fully fleshed out.
Yeah, that's really kind of amazing that a big uh movie person would sort of admit to that level of uh failure, I suppose. I mean, that's yeah, that makes me like him too. Now that you tell me this, I hadn't heard that quote before.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Although
Eh,
I will say that I don't fully agree with him on the special effects portion. Um, I don't know about you. I think the action in this movie is not filmed very well.
y-
Uh,
I yeah, I think it was part of the problem. I agree. You know, the parts that I did see. Um,
it's very handheld cam. It's very shaky. He likes to do this thing where even if the camera is stationary, if a character takes a punch, he shakes the camera. Even if
uh-huh.
the camera is not moving, like he shakes the camera to add impact to the punch, and I don't think it works. And I don't know if you notice, he does this really weird thing, like only twice in the movie. Once during the initial heist at the beginning, and then once when the two main characters are fighting at the end. But he does this weird, like, sped up, over the shoulder thing that felt kind of video gamey to me. Um, it was only in those two moments, and it just like was so jarring. It just took me completely out of it. I didn't know what he was going for there, and it doesn't fit with the style of anything else he shot. So it was just really weird, really weird.
I, I I don't remember that, but it sounds really distracting, definitely.
Yeah, it was.
Um, this is probably a huge nitpick, but toward the beginning, one thing that was distracting me was that like every gun does something unbelievable and different, which was fun in District 9 when they were all alien guns that were being tested. But this is like supposed to be a like live combat firefight, and like everyone is fiddling with these like toy trick guns that do weird things.
Yeah,
And it's like they would have actually been more effective if they all just had AK-47s that they didn't have to like push seven buttons on. I mean, it just the whole thing was just like, this is such a game that I would have played when I was 13 in my imagination. Or, you know, 9 actually, probably not even
yeah.
13.
What do you
Um,
think of the whole power armor concept? Because while I
oh
think it
yeah,
was a neat idea, I don't know. It just there was
that
nothing to it. It didn't really tie into anything thematically.
that's probably even closer to the crux of what I'm whining about, which is that you have no idea what the power armor can and can't do. Like, God, I feel like such a nitpicker here, but like he's crawling around, like he gets hit by something and then he's like crawling around pathetically, and it's like, why are you crawling? You have a direct neural connection to the powered suit. You're not using your muscles to move,
Right.
and and then it's like sometimes it seems to protect him, but you're like, why is it protecting him? It's just like strips along the back of his arms. Why should that protect his skin against
Yeah.
anything that's hitting it from the front? So all of these things are distracting me while they're happening because it's not even really power armor. It's like it's just making him a bit stronger than it. God, I'm nitpicking, but it was so distracting at the time. Yeah, it was like you didn't really think it through all the way.
And I
And
don't
you,
think it. I think it was just one of these. It was a cool idea. It was a distinctive look because they put it on every single poster as Matt Damon in this power armor. But yeah, like what does it do? Like at first it makes it seem like the only reason they install this stuff on him is because he's dying and he's so weak that he couldn't even accomplish this heist by himself. So he needs the armor just to be able to stand and stuff.
right.
But then it kind of goes beyond that, where it's like super powerful when the other bad guy gets his own set of power armor. Like he wins the fight by ripping the guy's neural connection out. So yeah, I don't even know anymore. It's just really nebulous. Yeah, I mean, we could keep nitpicking this, and I think it's because there's so many things worth nitpicking. I
Yeah.
think Spider, the guy who smuggles people up to Elysium. Spider's whole plan and the reason why he uses Max doesn't make any sense to me. Max needs a ticket up to Elysium. Spider says, if you do something for me, I'll give it to you. The thing he has him do requires a lot of physical exertion, and the guy's dying of radiation poisoning. And then when he says he wants his own team, Spider says, no, I already got my own team. So why are you even bringing this guy in at all? It doesn't really make any sense.
Right. It's like first it's like, yeah, no one's suicidal enough to go through with this. 5 seconds later, yeah, I got these guys over here. They'll go with you.
Yeah, here's my team. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. Yeah. We could keep going, but I think the overall thing is, and the reason why I think District 9 worked and this one didn't is, and I think you said it needed more time in the oven. The script needed more time. It needed probably a few more drafts to really come down and focus on what it really wanted to do and wanted to achieve, and the themes it wanted to go after. And I just don't think it did that. But it wasn't as bad as our final movie.
Yeah.
I listed Chappie as the worst movie of 2015, and I will stand by that after watching it again just a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
This movie, Matt, is awful.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're looking at a chart of these three movies, there's District 9 way at the top, Elysium somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit lower, and then Chappie under the graph.
Yeah. I mean, if the last movie should have stayed in the oven longer, then if I were him, I would have looked in the oven where Chappie was cooking, and then closed the oven and set it to like self-clean mode where it gets up to like 900 degrees, and just leave it there until it was just charred to ash, and then just start over with a new movie.
Yeah.
How's that for a metaphor?
I loved it. It was good. Beautiful. Yeah. So we talked a lot about Elysium, how it was trying to do too many things. I think Chappie does that in like overdrive. I think they're trying to talk about AI versus human decision-making powers. I think they're trying to give a message about how maybe humanity itself is the problem. They're trying to talk about free will versus determination. They're trying to talk about what is consciousness and what is not consciousness, and the movie decides that consciousness is something that can be downloaded using a bunch of PlayStation 4s. and then there's this whole like maker versus father, like God versus parental influence thing going on. There's just so much, and it's all terrible because none of it gets time to be fully fleshed out. I said this in my review when I reviewed this last year. I don't know what Blomkamp was trying to say in this movie, and I don't think it's clear. And I think if the goal of a movie is to get some point across, this fails. This fails completely.
Yeah. For a director who demonstrated such an understanding of character and the importance of focusing the story in his earlier movie, this movie's totally incomprehensible because I can't even remember the plot of it, like sitting here. And that's, I mean, I don't know, that's really unusual for me. I
can summarize it for you as best I can.
Yes, please do, because I feel like that will be interesting.
So this man, played by Dev Patel, Dion Wilson, creates a artificial intelligence that a weak kind of artificial intelligence that's used to basically replace all police with robots. And the robots are really effective. But what he wants to do is make a actual thinking, conscious robot. So he does that by creating Chappie. He throws it in an old damaged unit. At the same time, he gets kidnapped by two of the most annoying people in the world, Ninja and Yolandi, who found him as the guy who makes the robots and want to make him use his remote control to turn off all the robots so they can steal some stuff. So they get a hold of Chappie, and they kind of start to mold and shape Chappie in what they want to do. Yolandi wants to be the robot's Chappie's mother, where Ninja just wants to use him to do gangster stuff and steal things. Um, so you've got kind of the push and pull between what Dev wants for Chappie versus what the other two people want for Chappie. Then you've got Hugh Jackman's character, who's this whole other person who hates the idea of artificial intelligence at all, and he arranges to shut off every single one of the police robots just so his stupid military robot can be used instead. That's as best as I can do.
Yeah, I mean that demonstrates how completely too many things going on there are. I mean, I like complicated stories as much as anyone, but there's a point at which it just becomes a mess. And this movie very rapidly reaches that point where, just at the beginning of the movie, they just like keep introducing new things and new characters, and you're like, I don't get confused and don't care and don't like this person and
Yeah.
never quite. I also don't think they sold Chappie as a CGI character just because like it doesn't really have a face, but
No,
maybe
yeah.
that's just me.
Well, they really were going for the ears to be like animal ears. And they move around when Chappie's afraid or not. But yeah, it's just none of it works. And honestly, I think it all ties back to the fact that um, Neill Blomkamp loves The Antwoord, the rap group that plays Ninja and Yolandi. He loves these two people. He forced them in his movie, and he wrote a part in the movie around them. And they are terrible actors. Their characters
Yeah.
are terrible because they're basically just playing themselves. At one point, I mean, they're always listening to their own music. They're wearing their own clothing line. At one point, Yolandi has a shirt that says Chappie on it and has a robot logo. So at some point in the movie, she had enough time to get shirts made for a robot friend. It's just ridiculous, and it's grating and annoying. And I read something, and this is something we'll probably never know, but Hugh Jackman hated working with these guys so much that they had to cut basically all the scenes where they interacted at all out because he couldn't stand them. And that kind of makes sense. And mean, like, Hugh Jackman's character seems very like random villain that doesn't really fit into the overall story, and maybe that's just because all his scenes where he kind of interacted with the other characters was cut out.
That's very interesting. Off the top of my head, I don't even see where he would interact with the other characters, but maybe that's just lack of imagination. But
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, yeah, it's if like like you said, the metaphors don't work, and at least we can say what the metaphor was with Elysium. And in this one, I can't even name like what the overriding one is other than like uh human nature and automation maybe or something, and then you've got the character explosion problem.
Yeah.
Too many characters and none that you care about. I guess maybe like Yolandi is the closest thing to a character that you care about, which is kind of saying something.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and she's still a bad
and
person. I mean, these are thieves, and they never really do anything to redeem themselves, except for take care of Chappie, who, even until the end, Ninja is using for kind of his own devices. So yeah, I mean, like, it's the problem. The other two movies had kind of jerk main characters that redeemed themselves. I don't. I don't really think these guys do.
yeah, yeah. I don't even know what to make of the whole um the Antwoord inclusion. Like I'm literally speechless because I've never heard of anything like this where like a director making a movie on which a lot of money is riding was like, I'm gonna shut up everyone. I'm gonna take these these non actors who I'm obsessed with for completely non cinema related reasons and make them the stars of my movie just because I'm so obsessed with them.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like makes you suspect that he was having some mental problems or something, and not like as a joke, but like I don't know why else you would do that. It's such a horrible idea, such an obviously horrible idea. It makes me suspect I'm missing something. Um, because that's, if you say it like that, it's like, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't explain it. I can't explain this movie. And it's like, I think you and I were hoping when we went through this, we would find, like, what we would find definitively what happened from 2009 District 9, one of the most exciting new directors, to 2015 Chappie, um, just being a terrible failure in both writing and directing. um, we haven't even talked about the fact that there's a really weird moment in this movie where it shifts to ultra violence at the action scene at the end. Like, this is an action movie. There's been some shooting, but it hasn't been like Blomkamp's typical level of hyper violence, and I think that's good because I don't think it fits in this movie. But then when Hugh Jackman's moose thing is fighting them at the end, at one point he like steps on a character in the robot and then rips his the top half of him off and throws it against a wall. And then suddenly you're in this like super violent action scene that has no place in anywhere else in the movie. It's just tonally terrible, and it's just not well directed. I don't think his action is well directed here either.
Yeah, it's more like RoboCop, where
Yeah, but RoboCop was kind of tongue in cheek with that. Like,
right.
it was meant to be
It's
satirical.
it's interesting. So that quote that you read about Elysium, he's let me go and just look at it. He says, um, I still think the satirical idea of a ring filled with rich people hovering above the earth is an awesome idea, and that stuck out to me because I'm like, you didn't play that as
Yeah,
satirical.
no, it was not. Like, Elysium's not a satire.
Like maybe in some definitional sense of like metaphorical equals satirical, but to me satire always means that you're playing it for laughs on some level, or you're playing up the absurdity of it, even if you're not literally going for gags. But I didn't feel like I felt like Elysium was playing it totally straight, and I feel like this movie is also playing it totally straight. Maybe he doesn't realize that, like maybe he's trying to make like a schlocky violent action scene and ends up like an intentionally schlocky like RoboCop, where the robot uses like a million times more bullets than are necessary and just blows the guy's body to pieces, and everybody in the theater is laughing, except Blomkamp isn't doing it right, so no one in the theater is laughing, and they're all just kind of sick.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's something to that because I think District 9 was very satirical on its own. I mean, we even talked about how we were laughing at the outrageous kind of disintegration, blow up, spray of blood deaths of some of the characters. But even the rest of the movie, I mean, all the things with Vicus at the beginning of the movie where he's trying to act like the dude who's in charge, but clearly doesn't really know what's going on or isn't even fully aware of how much danger he's in, comes off very satirical. So maybe
yeah,
you're right. Maybe he thinks he's making satires, and I think it worked in District 9. And Elysium and Chappie are not satires. They're not.
yeah, because there's definitely like a couple of twists of perspective, and Jodie Foster's terrible accent becomes hilarious
Yeah.
on purpose rather than just dumb and annoying and hilarious by accident, or yeah, it's this weird thing where they're trying to be funny and then failing to be funny, and then that ends up being funny. um
Yeah. Well, and we're jumping back to Elysium now, but did you notice like Spanish is portrayed as like the poor people's language? Everyone in LA on Earth talks in Spanish, but like up in Elysium they randomly speak French. And
yeah, I think so.
that to me kind of maybe is a satirical turn on it a little bit, that like in his mind he's showing that Spanish is the dirty poor language, whereas French is somehow the upper class elite language, and kind of poking fun at the absurdity of that statement. But then not even, I don't know, but I think maybe he's trying, but I don't think it pulls it off.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting angle that I certainly hadn't thought of. That it's not so much that that a large number of the problems of his movies can be traced to not being as good at comedy as he would like to be, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And like just the joke, like the things that he's writing that on the page he thinks are jokes, and maybe he's like laughing to himself writing his screenplay, and then like the actors read them and he's shooting it, and then like the blood drains out of his face and he's like, oh god, this is not funny at all. But it's too late now, we're already shooting.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you can kind of tell that the gangster scenes with D'Antwoord and Chappie are maybe supposed to be funny, and like, but like, to me, it comes off as I'm supposed to be making fun of Ninja and Yolandi because they're stupid, terrible people. But if he likes these guys so much and they're playing themselves, I don't think the movie declares that. You know, like, there's a whole scene when he's teaching Chappie how to aim and shoot a gun, and he's doing it sideways without actually aiming the gun, and it's just like, it's so absurd and ridiculous. I mean, is that on purpose? Like, I want to assume the director's smarter than they are, but I don't know. It just doesn't come off as wanting to be, this is funny. This is me poking fun at this.
yeah, well, that if I recall, and I may be mashing together some scenes in my mind, but like it's very difficult to laugh at those scenes because Ninja is being so abusive toward Chappie the whole
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
So like maybe, yeah, I agree that like the scene when Ninja's like, this is how you shoot, and then he does this ridiculous caricature of how a gangster shoots, like you do laugh at that, but then but then you feel bad for laughing at it, and it's like, well, that's not really how to do the type of satire you may or may not be trying to do here. Um,
Yeah, because
that
it is
yeah,
Ninja the abusive, overbearing father, or is he a goofy comedic relief character?
right.
And
This
I
would
don't
be like
think
if
he can be both.
yeah, like Bill Murray doesn't hit the other Ghostbusters. It's it doesn't
Yeah,
work.
yeah. I like this perspective. I think maybe we did crack it. I think, he tried to go to delve more into satire with these other things, and he just wasn't able to pull it off. Um, but I mean, even if he still, I think Chappie's a bad enough movie where even if he did pull off that this is supposed to be like satirical, I still don't think the movie would have worked, because there's this weird diametrical thing where we're talking about how bad artificial intelligence could be, but at the same time they have a police force that's totally made of robots, and they are very clear that crime is completely down and it's working really effectively well. And Johannesburg is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, and all kinds of crime is down because of this police force. So it's like the movie's saying, "Hey, cops that don't have innate moral ability and can't make split second decisions based on their morals instead of pre-programmed stuff. That's a good thing." That's what the movie's
Yeah.
kind of saying. But then it never stops to really comment on the repercussion of that. It's like, is it saying that, is it making a comment on police officers and the issue with cops that's been going around, especially in our country? I don't think so. I don't think it's doing that. It doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, it's not going out of its way to do that, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just a mess.
yeah,
It's such a bad movie.
right. And the other thing about the police, the robot police, is that I'm not even sure, like like with okay, so most of the time he's doing metaphor, and I love metaphor in sci-fi, but with the robotic police thing, I'm not even sure that it's a metaphor. It might literally be a movie investigating the consequences of having a robotic police force, which is something that is like a plausible future thing that could happen at some
Yeah.
point. So it's like, well, now I'm just confused because are we talking about some metaphorical thing that a robotic police force is a metaphor for, or are we just talking about a robotic police force? And you like that's something that I need to be really clear on if I'm going to understand what the hell you're trying to tell me with this movie, like what this movie is about.
Yeah, but I don't even really think it's investigating that, because then Chappie has no place in that. because
That's true.
and the movie's called Chappie. I mean, if he wanted to do a movie exploring about what is consciousness and what is real and how we learn and grow and how we make choices based on what our maker designed for us versus what our parents designed for us. If that's the movie he wanted to make, he should have made that movie. And that is not this movie. It's only tangentially this movie. If he wanted to make a movie about the repercussions of artificial intelligence used in law enforcement, he should have made that movie.
Yeah.
It's just all very nebulous and
Right.
and bad.
Right. It makes me wonder. I mean, and I know I'm just making things up at this point, but like, what happens to you if you're, a young creative person and you get the opportunity to make a movie and you make it and you just put like a huge inhuman amount of effort into it because it's like your one shot and it comes out really well. This is of course like you made something like District 9.
Yeah.
And now like you're expected to be able to do that next time, and they're like, okay, here's a bucket of money. We're gonna need that script in 6 months. We're gonna start shooting in October. These are the actors that you're gonna be hiring, and we'll talk to you at the next meeting. And like, I guess what I'm saying in an extremely roundabout way is like, is the process the problem? Like someone who has this creative spark, sort of the creative spark itself gets snuffed out once they actually become part of the process, and they're expected to do what they did the first time through inspiration and obsession. They're expected to now be able to do that at the drop of a hat, you know, as a day job. Like, is that just an unreasonable thing to ask of people? Because I feel like this happens. Blomkamp isn't the only person who like made something great and then never could really quite live up to it again.
Right.
I feel like it's a common thing that happens to people.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely merit to that. I mean, another example, an even more recent example I can think of is Nick Pizzolatto, who did True Detective. The first season of True Detective was his baby, something he had been working on for years and years and years. That was super successful. They told him to make season 2, and he didn't have enough time to shape a story. So the biggest problem in True Detective season 2 was the writing was not very good, and maybe it's just because he needed years to refine and develop and pin down a story that he wanted to tell. And I mean, we don't, maybe, yeah, District 9 could be something Blomkamp was writing for a long time. And you're right, and then that hits. And I mean, he took 4 years between this and Elysium, and it's probably just overwhelming. Like, all of a sudden, if you want to get a movie made, if you have an idea, people will say, okay, make that movie. It's got to be crazy. And maybe it is an unreasonable expectation for these artists. I mean, it is still art, right?
Yeah.
It's a person putting everything into trying to create something new. And I think that's why, while I really think Chappie is a failed movie, I am interested in Blomkamp and his career, because I think he has more work to do and more things to say. And I want them to be as good as District 9, because I like that movie so much. I don't want him to fail.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, I think before this conversation and especially after this conversation, I feel the same. That I'm actually excited to see what he's coming out with next, and sort of holding out hope that maybe he'll get his head around, I don't know, whatever it is that's impeding him from realizing his vision, because I feel like he's the type of person who has a vision, and it's just difficult for him to articulate it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think part of it is just that he's trying to say really complicated and interesting things, and things that are inherently more difficult to convey, and maybe needs a little bit more practice to get there.
Can we agree that he should abandon the Aliens sequel project?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not going to go well.
According to IMDb, that's the only thing he's working on right now, which means nothing. He could have like 20 other things going on that just aren't formal or anything, but I know that Ridley Scott asked or told him to put his Aliens sequel on hold until he finishes his stupid prequel nonsense. So I know that his Blomkamp's Aliens thing is not coming out for a while, but I would much rather see him try to do something original than try to delve into some other property.
Yeah, I guess I'll backpedal just a little bit. Like he could very well shoehorn some totally, new and interesting metaphor into the alien mythos, because ultimately the alien mythos is a metaphor for, as we talked about in that podcast, all kinds of things mainly involving sexual violation.
Yeah.
And it could be good. I never I never like to say something's definitely going to be bad before I see it, because I can always be surprised. But yeah, maybe this will, and also like you say, if Ridley Scott is basically forcing him to spend more time on this, then maybe the result will be that he has a more polished product.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe
that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Silver linings.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that's Blomkamp. I'm impressed we went so long, considering it was just 3 movies. But I like this. I think I think it's very easy to dismiss someone. I really Chappie left such a bad taste in my mouth that I had kind of completely written Blomkamp off, and this whole project has kind of reinvigorated me in him. I think District 9 is a good enough movie to where he should be remembered fondly as a filmmaker, even if his next 2 movies didn't live up to that expectation. And I do want to see what he does next, as long as it's not Aliens 2.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's about the future of Blomkamp.
We should have probably looked up before we started.
I think it's Blomkamp, actually, which is neither of the ones that we suggested. I did look this up, but
okay.
that's fine.
All right. So that's it for Deconstructing Blomkamp. So before we go for the week, Matt, do you want to talk about what you've been watching?
Sure. I watched this fine film recently called, I think it's called The Do-Over. It's the recent Adam Sandler vehicle. And it was actually pretty funny.
I'm so disappointed in you.
Yeah, so like I was just as eager as everyone else to jump on the Adam Sandler is a sellout bandwagon, especially with the piece of crap, the Netflix thing recently. What was it called?
Ridiculous Six.
The Ridiculous Six, which was just as bad as everyone said it was. But this one, like the Do-Over, I was just laughing quite a bit, quite consistently, and a lot of it was like pretty over the top, gross out humor. But I guess that doesn't bother me personally. I mean, there's over the top, gross out humor that is just stupid and like pandering, and then there's like gross out humor where there's a joke buried in there somewhere and you actually laugh. And this was more of the latter. So I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised.
So it
also had like a plot, so that's good.
So you're telling me if I hang up the Skype call right now and go turn on The Do-Over, I'm going to enjoy it?
Well, it's going to be an Adam Sandler movie.
Okay.
And it also has
David Spade.
David Spade. So it's also a David Spade movie, which you're already buying into a certain level of like adolescent like nudity and gross out humor. So if you're okay with that, then yes, I think you will enjoy it. If that sounds really lame, then don't bother, because it's gonna be lame.
All right, man, I'm gonna do it on your recommendation. I'm gonna go watch this movie.
This might be the end of
this could be the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So before I go watch the Do-Over, I'm going to talk about The Nice Guys, which is a movie I saw. Actually, it was a couple weeks back, but I wanted to talk about it anyway because I love Shane Black, who wrote and directed this movie. If you don't know, Shane Black wrote Lethal Weapon, wrote The Last Boy Scout, um, wrote and directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, wrote and directed Iron Man 3. And this is his newest movie. It is a detective movie taking place in LA in the 1970s. It's kind of a noir detective movie starring Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. This movie is really, really good. I think I like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang better because I think that's like a perfect Shane Black film, and this is just a really good Shane Black film. But it's really funny. Shane Black kind of hates humanity, I think, and this movie kind of reflects that. It's perfectly violent and dark and negative in all the ways it needs to be, but really funny. Ryan Gosling is doing not the suave, like cool character he usually plays, but like a kind of goofy, awkward failure alcoholic of a guy. Russell Crowe is playing a character who has just been beaten down by life and just doesn't care about anything anymore, and they really play off each other so well. Matt, you need to see this movie. I know you probably won't be able to see it in the theaters, but the first time it's available for you to see at home, I think you need to watch it.
Yeah, I almost want to try to see it in theaters because everything about this movie sounds like it's right up my alley, including the main characters. Um, I think when it, like I saw the trailer for this for the first time, my wife said something along the lines of, "Look, it's both of your boyfriends," to me because Russell Crowe and um, Ryan Gosling are my favorite.
They're so good. I don't know if I want a sequel to this movie, but I want to see those two play off each other in movies more after this. I could have watched them interact with each other for hours. It was so good.
So happy to hear that.
So yeah, that was it for us this week. Next week we are doing a video game related podcast because Warcraft is coming out. We're doing a new section next week called The World's Finest, where our three people are going to bring a movie that best represents a topic of our choice. This time it is Best Video Game Movie. So Matt, I know you're really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because as it turns out, video game movies are all terrible.
Yeah, you would be shocked.
So finding the best one is rather difficult. I'm looking forward to this talk, but I think it was really surprising how when you pull it up on Wikipedia, a list of every single video game movie, just seeing like truly how terrible this list is.
Yeah.
was shocking to me.
It's really long and there's nothing good on it.
Nothing good. So it's going to be a really positive talk as we try to scramble to come up with good things to say and argue why our terrible movie is better than the other person's terrible movie. That should be fun.
Yeah, just watch it as an exercise in psychology.
All right, Matt, where can you be found on the internet?
On Twitter at @MoreThanAMail, and my other writing is on dailyplanetfilms.com.
Great. I'm also on Twitter at Daly, Scott Daly 85. That's DALY. You can also follow our website at Daily Planet Films, and my writing is at dailyplanetfilms.com as well. Please subscribe, review this podcast, share it, do all the things you need to do. Matt, do we want to talk about our Patreon real quick too?
Sure. Yeah, we finally set up a Patreon account, which for those not familiar is just a way of supporting us, supporting our writing, our podcasts, and potentially making it possible for us to expand and do other things, more things than we're doing currently. So that's just a nice little opportunity for us to bring more delightful content to the world.
Yeah, every cent of what we will earn on that will be turned back into the website to do things. Yeah, like better equipment for the podcasts, better stuff on our website. We'll not have to run ads anymore, which would be lovely. I don't like the ads, but all this stuff costs money, and we're paying for it out of our own pocket. But we love doing it, so that's why we're doing it. But if you want to donate, please do. If you don't want to donate but just want to share or review, I would love that just as much. But any help would be very much appreciated. We love doing this, and we want to keep doing it. So, and we want to keep making people happy.
That's right. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So that's it for us this week, and we will see you all next week.
Podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next Friday. There'll be